to take these huge stacks of research and just distill them down, giving you a real shortcut to being well informed. Today, we are wading into a topic that is, well, it's profoundly personal. And for those who live with it, it's completely life-altering. We're talking about phobias. Specifically, we're going to get into those intense, overwhelming responses to something that, logically really shouldn't be a threat at all.
And that logical conflict you just mentioned, that is the absolute core of what we're talking about. We have to draw a really clear line between, say, general anxiety or a reasonable fear, like being nervous in a big storm, and a clinical phobia. A phobia isn't just being scared. It's a persistent, a really disproportionate fear that genuinely disrupts your life.
So if I'm getting this right from the material, the defining thing is that the rational part of your brain knows you're safe, but your body just it completely overrides that fact. It's like an alarm system that's stuck on I.
Exactly. The rational mind is sitting there saying, it's just water in a bathtub. But the ancient survival-focused part of the brain, it launches a full-scale physical panic. We're talking rapid heartbeat, hyperventilation, dizziness, and that overwhelming physical need to escape. It doesn't matter what the environment actually is. That's the key distinction. That's what makes it a clinical issue.
And when we talk about a fear that intense, the specific focus for this deep dive, the one the source has really explored, is hydrophobia, the fear of water. So today, our mission is to unpack what that really means, go beyond the usual assumptions, look at its surprising origins, and detail the methods suggested for transforming it.
It's a powerful and, I think, a very misunderstood phenomenon.
So let's start by just clarifying the definition.
Okay, let's do that. Let's unpack the core definition,
Sure.
because we're not talking about someone who, just prefers the mountains to the beach. No, not at all. The sources define it as an intense, uncontrollable fear, where the mere presence, or even just a thought or an image of water, triggers that full panic response we mentioned. It has nothing to do with hating water. It's all about a sudden, overwhelming physical reaction that just bypasses any conscious control.
And I think what really surprised me in the research was just how broad the triggers are. Most people hear fear of water and they immediately think of, the ocean or a deep lake, and those are definitely triggers. But the material shows just how many smaller, everyday things can set this off.
It's the constant intrusion into daily life that makes it so severe. I mean, yes, massive bodies of water are terrifying for someone with this condition. But the phobia extends to small, routine encounters. We're talking about people who genuinely struggle with taking showers or baths. Rain can cause panic. Even just walking near a public fountain can be a major issue.
That immediately puts the level of disruption into perspective. So for someone living with this, it's not just missing out on a beach vacation. They're actively managing their day around the possibility of getting splashed.
Precisely. And the reaction is anything but proportional. The material specifically mentions that for some people, just the sound of water, like a running faucet or water going down a drain, that can be enough to start the physical response. The breathlessness, the shaking, the rapid heartbeat, and that strong, immediate urge to get away. It's a sign the brain has completely misclassified what's happening.
Okay, so this is where the analysis goes beyond the symptoms and into the why. Why does this happen? It doesn't really seem to make evolutionary sense to fear the very thing that keeps us alive. What did the research point to as the main root causes?
Well, it identifies 4 interwoven factors, which confirms this is rarely a simple single-issue thing. It's more of a complex tapestry woven from direct experience, what we see, and our environment.
Let's start with the one that feels most intuitive. Direct experience. That one traumatic event.
Right. Past traumatic experiences. That's the classic one. A near-drowning incident, a sudden fall into deep water, or being held underwater for too long, even accidentally. In those moments, the brain's survival center, let's call it the brain's smoke alarm, it registers water as the direct cause of a life-and-death situation. And that neural pathway is instantly cemented. Water equals threat.
But here's what I found so fascinating and kind of troubling. You don't even have to be the one who is in danger, right? The sources talked a lot about observational learning.
That's right, and this is where the fear becomes vicarious. The brain is an incredible modeler. If you witness someone else in a state of just sheer terror in the water, maybe watching a parent panic, or even a vivid scene in a movie, your brain logs that event. It processes the fear you observe, the physical signs of distress, and it creates the same threat link as if it had happened to you.
So in that case, the fear makes no logical sense because you were never actually in danger. But the memory of fear is stored as if it were your own.
Exactly. The system is firing based on association, not on the immediate facts. We're talking about the amygdala, the emotional processing center, triggering that fight or flight response. Adrenaline just floods your system. It's not checking if the water is waist deep or 10,000 feet deep. It's just responding to a learned code that says water means it's time to panic.
That helps ground the technical side of it. But if the fear is learned from a parent, how do we know it's not partly genetic? Did the research distinguish between learned behavior and, say, an inherited predisposition?
That's a great question.
Mm.
The material suggests it's not genetic in the way we think of, like eye color. It's more a strong influence of learned behavior interacting with a general predisposition for anxiety. The fear itself is modeled and then reinforced. Which brings us to the other two components: family influence and lack of exposure.
Tell us a bit more about that family dynamic.
Well, if a primary caregiver, a parent, a grandparent, shows a real fear of water, constantly warns against it, or just forbids any water activities, the child absorbs that reality. Water gets framed as this unpredictable, dangerous force. So the fear is passed on not through genes, but through behavior and consistent messaging.
And then there's that final piece, just a simple lack of exposure, which seems like it would be incredibly common.
It is. If you grew up without structured swimming lessons or even just consistent positive experiences splashing around, having fun water remains an unknown. And to the primitive part of our brain, the unknown is dangerous by default. Water is fluid, it's unpredictable. It becomes a symbol for chaos. Without that familiarity, it stays categorized as a threat.
So the big takeaway here is that whether it starts with direct trauma, seeing someone else's trauma, or just avoidance, the result is the same. The brain's survival system kicks in even when the water is shallow and perfectly safe. It's reacting to history, not the present.
That's the paradox right there. The strength of that past memory just completely overpowers present reality.
It's such a deeply rooted thing, which makes you realize how much this fear affects, well, everything. Not just a day at the beach. I mean, for anyone listening, just consider the scope of the impact. This isn't an inconvenience. It restricts life in so many ways. What did the research say about that?
The impacts are huge, much bigger than most people realize. They touch personal, social, professional life. Personally, as we said, it can interfere with basic hygiene. But socially, the isolation can be really severe.
How does that show up, that isolation?
Well, just think about how many activities are centered around water. Family vacations, pool parties, water parks, destination weddings, all of these become sources of intense stress, or they're just completely off limits. This often leads to deep social anxiety, feeling excluded, having to make up excuses. It just erodes your confidence.
It's the constant anxiety of anticipation, isn't it? Knowing a trigger could be around any corner. A friend suggests a fishing trip, a kid wants to play in the sprinkler. The fear is always there.
Absolutely. The research points to the severe internal cost over and over again. It destroys your mental peace. So the cognitive effort of avoiding water is exhausting. The stress from simply thinking about water or planning your day around the rain forecast is immense.
So if this is resonating with you, if you recognize that pattern of avoidance, the message from all this research is really clear. This fear is real, it's powerful, and you are not alone.
Invalidation is always the first step. Understanding this is a malfunction in the brain's alarm system, not a personal failing,
Yeah.
that opens the door to actually treating it.
Which brings us to the positive news. Hydrophobia is treatable. The sources lay out a pretty detailed roadmap. The goal isn't to force someone to swim with sharks, but to just rebuild a basic trust. What are the core techniques?
The cornerstone technique, which is universally supported in the material for phobias like this, is gradual exposure therapy. It's often combined with elements of cognitive behavioral therapy. It's systematic, it's controlled, and it takes commitment, but it works by basically exploiting the brain's ability to learn new associations.
We mentioned looking at water, touching it. Can we break down that progression a bit more? How does that systematic process actually work on the brain?
Certainly. Exposure therapy is essentially habituation. You deliberately expose someone to the trigger in a safe, controlled way, and you stay in the presence of the water until that initial panic, that adrenaline spike, starts to naturally subside. When the body realizes again and again that the water is not followed by the catastrophe it's predicting, the fear response starts to extinguish itself.
So you're breaking the association, you're rewiring water plus panic, danger into water plus no danger, safety.
That's it, exactly. And the progression is meticulous. It starts at the lowest possible level, maybe just looking at photos of still water or watching videos of gentle rain.
Yeah.
The next steps might be standing in a dry bathtub, then running the faucet, then sitting next to a glass of water, then touching it with one finger, only then moving to shallow immersion.
That sounds like it requires a lot of patience.
It does. Patience is critical. And alongside the physical steps, you need mental tools. That's non-negotiable. Breathing and deep relaxation techniques are taught to help manage the panic surge while it's happening. This gives you a tool to manually regain some control over that physiological response, which is crucial for being able to stay present during the exposure.
And the professional guidance piece, which the sources really stress, that must be key to keeping it safe and manageable.
Oh, absolutely. Professional guidance from a licensed therapist or a trained swim instructor ensures two things. One, that the exposure is always controlled and safe. And two, that the person is actively challenging the catastrophic thoughts that are fueling the panic.
What kind of thoughts are we talking about?
We call them catastrophic cognitions. Thoughts like, if I step in, I will drown immediately, or the water will swallow me. The treatment involves challenging those thoughts, replacing them with reality-based ones. I am in shallow water. I can stand up. The therapist is right here. I am breathing.
So the goal isn't just tolerating water, it's a full cognitive and emotional restructuring.
That's it. It's about rebuilding trust, step by step. Every small victory, every time someone chooses to stay instead of fleeing, it rewires the mind. It reduces the perceived threat, turning water from an enemy into something neutral or, eventually even enjoyable.
This has been a really comprehensive look at how our minds and bodies are tied to perceived danger, even when it's irrational. The key theme we've pulled out today is this amazing potential for transformation. That fear, even one as intense as hydrophobia, can be systematically overcome.
And it really highlights the immense power of our survival system to prioritize learned fear over rational fact. The body remembers trauma long after the thinking brain has moved on. The physical reaction is real, even if the current threat is not.
Which raises a really important and I think a provocative question for you, the listener, to think about as you go about your day. If the brain can be so strongly convinced to activate a full survival response for something as harmless as a running shower or calm puddle, what does that suggest about our learned understanding of other everyday risks? I mean, how much of your own perceived danger in areas that have nothing to do with water is based on stored memory and outdated associations rather than immediate empirical fact?
Something to think about the next time you feel that unexpected spike of adrenaline.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the architecture of fear and the path toward reclaiming control. We'll see you next time.